Hour for August. Tonight we're going to talk about a really interesting herb, Lobelia, which has been called the intelligent herb. And we're going to learn about this plant, which I think is one of the most interesting and useful plants in the Western Materia Medica. And it has a lot of very amazing uses and healing properties. So we'll start off with the fact that there are over 400 species of lobelias, and it was named for a French botanist, Matthias de Lobel. And you'll find a lot of these flowers in gardens because they can be really pretty. There's a nice little tiny species of lobelia that I've seen in nurseries here in Utah. This particular flower is called Cardinal Lobelia, and I took this in Zion National Park. It was just a gorgeous plant. However, the species that we're talking about in particular is a species called Lobelia inflata, and it's native to the eastern United States, and was brought into the Materia Medica by Samuel Thompson. We'll talk about it in a minute. Now, there has been some research done on constituents of lobelia, particularly since it contains alkaloids. The most studied one, and the one that's in the biggest quantity, is lobeline. And lobeline, as we'll see in a minute, has been very well researched. But lobeline by itself is not responsible for all the actions of lobelia, because all of these other alkaloids have effects too. There's also a compound in there that may have some sedative activity, and then some other compounds, a little bit of volatile oil and a bit of glycoside. So lobeline is basically a sympathetic nervous system mimic. It's a mimic actually of nicotine, and also of the epinephrine, norepinephrine neurotransmitters. Now, when nicotine attaches to the receptors in the sympathetic nervous system that got their name from tobacco, the nicotinic receptors, it stimulates them, it excites them. However, there is a little bit of a paradoxical action in nicotine, just like there is in lobelia, in that a tiny amount of nicotine sedates them, and a large amount of nicotine stimulates them. So sometimes, people who just take a little occasional puff of a cigarette, they find it relaxing, but the chain smokers, it elevates their blood pressure and does all these sympathetic reactions. Lobelia does the same thing, except it does it in reverse. Lobeline attaches to the nicotinic receptors and inhibits them. Now, since nicotinic receptors cause muscles to contract and basically are part of what we would think of as the fight or flight response, basically initiating a hyper state of alertness and tension and so forth, lobelia does the opposite. Lobelia counteracts the effect of epinephrine, norepinephrine, basically counteracting the stress reaction. And it crosses the blood-brain barrier and attaches to receptors in the brain. And because it attaches to the same receptors as nicotine, lobeline for a while was sold as an over-the-counter no smoking deterrent. There was actually research showing that lobeline cut the desire to smoke, and I have used that and recommended it to people in the form of lobelia. The problem is that medicine can't distinguish between a whole plant and an alkaloid found in a plant. And so they attribute the fact that if it contains lobeline, then all of the side effects of lobeline must be in lobelia, which isn't true. Now, they discontinued lobeline as an over-the-counter no smoking deterrent, probably because of some of the side effects of it. Lobelia just doesn't have the same problems. And part of that is because some of these alkaloids in lobelia have a strong emetic effect, meaning that they actually stimulate vomiting. And that's how lobelia was discovered. This plant had been in use medicinally by the Native Americans before Samuel Thompson introduced it to the white population. But the way Samuel Thompson discovered it is not from Native American medicine. He liked to chew on plants just to see their effects. He said he learned a lot about, what plants could be used medicinally by chewing on them and noticing their effects. Well, he chewed on some lobelia and it made him throw up. So he thought, well, this is good. He would give it to his friends as a gag and say, here, eat some of this. And they would eat it and then they would throw up, and he, got a kick out of that. So the story is that one day he was out working in the field with someone and he found a little bit of lobelia. He gave it to him to eat this, and the guy ate it. And then I started to say, I feel horrible. I feel sick to my stomach, blah, blah, blah. He started to sweat. And Thompson got alarmed. He thought, I've given him something poisonous. He's going to die. He went to lead him back to the house. The man um, basically wound up throwing up when he got back to the house. He suddenly had this really hearty appetite. He ate a big meal, said he hadn't felt better in his life, and went back and worked. And that's when Thompson got the idea that this could be a medicine. And he created this idea that disease was caused by this obstruction or congestion in the system that kept the digestive powers from raising the heat or the vital energy. And he made lobelia his number one medicine. So Thompson devised a system of healing that involved lobelia his number one, capsicum his number two, and bayberry root bark or other astringents in the form of a preparation called herbal composition powder as his number three. And he used those medicines on just about everything. Now, the fact that lobelia can make you throw up has earned it some interesting names: pukeweed, gag root, vomit wort. It's also called Indian tobacco. I've seen some herbal formulas that basically say they contain Indian tobacco. That's a term for lobelia. Now, lobelia can have some alarming effects, like Samuel Thompson learned when he gave it to his friend, and the guy got really nauseous and started to sweat and so forth. And that's particularly true when you take it in high doses. And it can cause a very deeply relaxed state of the body. Now, that's unusual, but I did read in one book that if you got enough lobelia in your system, you would basically get to the point that you just were so relaxed that you wouldn't move. You just lie there, limp. Your heart would be fine, your breathing would be fine. It doesn't depress your nervous system, so it doesn't cause any danger of death, but you're just so relaxed you can't move muscle. And the only time I've seen that is someone came and called me, and they said they'd given some lobelia to their little kid, and the kid was just lying there kind of limp. I said, just wait a little bit, he'll get over it in about half an hour or so, and he did. And by the way, I found out that kava kava can have the exact same effect if you take enough kava kava. In other words, if you take enough of a strong antispasmodic muscle relaxing herb, it can actually make you so relaxed that you don't want to move. So that's just some cautions. Now, lobelia has been controversial since its introduction into herbal medicine. Lobelia started with a medical doctor who lived in the same town as Thompson, an allopathic physician. All his patients were going to Thompson, and he was losing all of his patients. So he became jealous, and he filed charges that Thompson had murdered a man with lobelia. In other words, one of Thompson's patients had died, and he charged that Thompson had killed him with lobelia. Now, these are doctors who were prescribing calomel, mercury oxide, arsenic, strychnine, antimony, and all of these other poisons, and they're claiming that Thompson killed people. Thompson said that, the doctors will poison a man by inches, and they know that herbal medicine is better than orthodox medicine because in orthodox medicine, they're allowed to have patients die under their care, but you can't have a patient die under your care if you're an herbalist, or otherwise you're guilty of a crime. I thought that was kind of an interesting point of view. Anyway, but Thompson got thrown in jail, and Matthew Wood described it this way: after languishing in an unheated, urine-soaked cell with a child molester, the case was brought to court, and the charges were shown to be fabricated. It was shown that the plant that the doctor claimed he had killed a person with wasn't even lobelia, and Thompson even wasn't allowed to take the stand and make a defense, and he was acquitted of all charges. But for the next 100 years, allopathic books would repeat that Thompson had killed somebody with Lobelia. And even today, if you look on Wikipedia, it will say, Lobelia could cause nausea, true. It could cause vomiting, true. It could cause profuse sweating, true. But then it will also say it can cause convulsions, coma, and death. Now, coma, if you're talking about the fact that for maybe half hour, you might be in such a deeply relaxed state you don't want to move. If you call that a coma, it's not a coma. You're perfectly alert. You're not close to death. There's nothing wrong with you. That'd be accurate, but it doesn't put people in comas. It doesn't cause people to convulse, other than maybe when they're throwing up. And it never has killed anyone. And this contrasts with what herbalists say about this. Paul Bergner, who's one of the best researchers on herbal medicine that I know of, did a paper on this, and his conclusion was no credible evidence of lobelia toxicity or any adverse effect more serious than vomiting is present in the medical literature of the past 200 years of this. 20th century literature that alleges lobelia toxicity provides no primary references or alleged least toxic dose. Modern allegations appear to be parroted uncritically from early 19th century sources, in other words, the people who were accusing Thompson of killing people with lobelia. Now, I was working for Nature Sunshine when the FDA came and said, you can't sell lobelia, lobelia is a poison, blah, blah, blah. And Nature Sunshine had to remove lobelia from probably about 30 different herbal formulas. And but Achala, the botanist who was working for Nature Sunshine at the time, did an extensive, exhaustive literature search. And she could only find 2 cases of death attributed to poisoning with lobelia. One was in England in 1890 when an obese man suffering from angina and a bleeding ulcer took lobelia to make himself throw up, and in the act of throwing up, he tore his bleeding ulcer and had internal bleeding and died. Now, granted, that was a stupid use of lobelia, but the lobelia didn't directly kill him. It was the act of vomiting when you had a bleeding ulcer that killed him. The other case was a lady who'd smoked cigarettes with lobelia and datura, or gypsum weed, which is a plant that grows around here in the Southwest. In fact, I've got some growing in my yard, which is an extremely powerful sympathetic nervous system stimulant that can cause hallucinations and is toxic and can kill you. And people wind up in the hospital here locally trying to get high on this plant every year. There are people who experiment with it, kids usually, try to experiment with it and wind up in the hospital, and it has killed people. And this lady smoked cigarettes made of lobelia and this other herb for 20 years to relieve her asthma. And after they died, she says, well, that was what killed her. So that was really stretching it to say that anybody's ever died of lobelia. Now, in contrast to all of that, Thompson had this to say about lobelia. He said, much has been said of the power of the emetic herb, and some have expressed fears of it on that account. But I can assure the public that there is not the least danger in using it. I have given it to children from 1 day old to persons of 80 years. It is most powerful in removing disease, but innocent in nature. Its operation in different persons is according to their different tempers. There are 2 cases where the medicine will not operate. Now, this is one of the most fascinating statements that I've ever read. And my personal experience with this plant suggests that what he's saying is absolutely true. He says the first case in which lobelia will do nothing is when the person is dying, when they're maybe an hour away from death. And what he said is there is no vital spark of life to stir up. And so because there's no vital energy left in the body, the person is basically dying, lobelia does nothing. Okay? And the second is where there's no disease. What he says is if there's no obstruction in the system, no tension in the system, lobelia doesn't do anything either. Now, one time when I was having some struggles with my health, I decided to try lobelia in a fairly high dose. And I took, I think it was like 12 capsules. And although I felt a little bit nauseous and sweated some, I did not throw up with 12 capsules. And I talked to another guy who had actually taken, and he had been sick and had a really clean digestive tract, and he took 15 capsules and didn't throw up. In contrast, I know people who are very sick and maybe have, suffering from a lot of mucus congestion and everything, and they've taken 1 capsule and thrown up. So there's something to what Thompson is saying, that it acts differently depending if your system is really congested. As lobelia relaxes the system, then that opens up for the body to start clearing the congestion, and you can get some pretty strong symptoms. But if there's no congestion, if there's no toxins obstructing the system, then the action appears to be very benign. And like I said, I've actually experienced that myself. Now, Pretty Meeks was a pioneer physician in Utah, and all of the early physicians in Utah were Thompsonians. I've got a book by a midwife physician who lived not too far from where I live in Orderville, who was a Thompsonian. I've got a few other books and notes from other Thompsonian physicians in Utah. So the whole Thompsonian medicine was widely practiced in Utah. And John Christopher discovered Pretty Meeks' journal, and he read it. And actually, that's one of the things that propelled Dr. John Christopher, who was really kind of the founder of the modern day herb movement, to begin with herbs. And this is what Pretty Meeks said about lobelia. He said, I don't know what high praise I could place on lobelia to be competent with its virtues, for lobelia will act on the system in complete conformity with the laws of health. It will permeate the whole system till it finds where the obstruction is seated, and there it will spend its influence and powers by relaxing the parts that are obstructed. And again, he's implying this thing that Thompson says, that it doesn't affect the parts of the body that are healthy and not obstructed. It only works on the parts that are obstructed. Always accompany the lobelia with cayenne pepper or capsicum, which is the best stimulant that is known in the compass of medicine. And Thompson also always administered cayenne and lobelia together. Now, this is what he describes that the combination of those 2 things will do. They will act on the whole system like an increased flow of water turned into a muddy spring of water. It will soon run clear. In other words, it'll clean out the dirt out of the spring and make the spring run clear again. And although lobelia is set at naught and persecuted the way it is ordained of God to be used in wisdom. Now, a different doctor, a medical doctor who was a nature doctor, wrote a book called Nature's Healing Agents, said this about lobelia, very similar again to what Thompson says. He says the #1 agent on the Natura physician's armamentarium is lobelia. In other words, he's saying, like Thompson said, the #1 medicine that you should be familiar with and have on your list of remedies that you know how to use is lobelia. Lobelia is one of nature's few dual agents in the relief of human ailments. It is both a relaxant and a stimulant, depending altogether on how it is prescribed. Hence, if the Natura physician could choose one remedy from others, it would be lobelia, and his practice would be successful. So many claims have been made for this agent, and so many more could honestly be made for it were its virtues fully understood. Most unjustly, lobelia has been and continues to be labeled a poison. In my 56 years at the writing, I have prescribed it for children and people advanced in age in 3 drops to newborn children, 15 drops every 15 minutes for hours, or a maximum doses of 60 drops. In other words, the maximum dose at one time being 60 drops. To older persons with never but any of the best results. If there is any such thing as a general panacea, a panacea is something that cures everything, I would say lobelia comes closer to being such than any other agent I've used these many years. Now, John Christopher picked this up, and he wrote extensively about lobelia in his book, The School of Modern Medicine. And this is what he said, School of Herbal Medicine. Lobelia is one of the greatest herbs ever given to the world. Lobelia is a general corrector of the whole system, and it is easily diffused and able to influence the entire body. Over years of practice, lobelia has been administered many times, and there have been numerous miraculous healings. Time after time, lobelia has helped the very young to the very old with only positive results. By the way, I've given lobelia to my kids when they were only like less than a month old. on a couple of occasions. So I have also given Lobelia to very young children and older people. I'm actually less likely to give it to older people than I am young people. I tend to use more tonic herbs on old people than detoxifying herbs. But again, I used it on all my children when they were sick. I used Lobelia. I didn't use capsicum because it's rather spicy. I used gentler herbs like peppermint and so forth. But it was one of my go-tos. A few drops, just a few drops of Lobelia administered, say, with the ALJ to clear the lungs, or echinacea, or other herbs, to basically catalyze or move the healing influence of the other herbs together better. Anyway, he says, as for Lobelia being a poison, this is one of the most ridiculous falsehoods ever foisted on the public by orthodox allopaths. Lobelia is this is from another part. Lobelia is a selective herb. Now, this is a really, again, this is like making a statement like this, sounds absolutely stupid to people who are schooled in the idea that of drug medicine, that basically you're taking chemicals and they force a reaction in the body, and therefore that reaction will always be the same. What they're saying is Lobelia acts in harmony with the intelligence of the body. So he says, if you are giving it to a woman who is miscarrying, if the fetus is dead or the fetus is dying, Lobelia will aid the abortive process. However, if the fetus is well and healthy and the woman's aborting because she's weak, it will heal the mother and enable her to carry the child until the proper time of delivery. Now, I have used Lobelia along with false unicorn to avert miscarriage, and I did it in particular. One of my ex-wives, when she was pregnant, she got exposed to pesticides and started to miscarry the next day. We gave her capsicum, Lobelia, false unicorn, and kept administering to her, and we stopped the miscarriage. And our midwife came over and said that we were the only couple she ever knew whose wife had been exposed to pesticides and she hadn't lost the baby. So I've actually used this, okay, and it will help her carry the child to the proper time. Lobelia accurately and intelligently selects which way to go. It is truly a thinking herb. That's where I got the thing that Lobelia is an intelligent herb. So that's why it's called the intelligent herb, because it seems to benefit many different conditions and act differently depending on what the need is to restore the body to health. So it was not only Thompson's #1 herb and regarded as a #1 herb by John Christopher. Jethro Kloss spends many pages on it in Back to Eden. And a lot of these authors consider it a practical panacea or cure-all. Now, Matthew Wood is an herbalist I really love, and he's one of the herbalists who asserts that a plant has its own personality. And if plants do have a personality, Lobelia is a trickster. I mean, it started off as a trickster. Thompson used it to play gags on his friends, right? To trick his friends, to make them throw up. And then turned out found it had a healing property. Matthew Woods calls it the wildest and craziest article in the Herbal Materia Medica, which I think is an interesting thing. These are some of Lobelia's major healing properties. First of all, it's analgesic. Anytime there is pain in Chinese medicine, pain is considered an obstruction of some sort. In other words, the body is obstructed in some way. There's an obstruction of qi. There's an obstruction of blood. There's muscle tension causing obstruction, and therefore herbs that relieve obstruction relieve pain. And Lobelia is definitely an herb that can act as an analgesic when the pain is being caused by some kind of obstruction in the body. It also acts as an anodyne, which is another term for pain reliever. It's anti-abortive. As I mentioned, it can be used to stop miscarriage. It's antiarrhythmic. Lobelia slows and strengthens and normalizes the heart rate, making it a very valuable circulatory herb. And contrary to the idea that it causes convulsions, Lobelia has been used as an herb to help stop epileptic seizures. So it's anti-epileptic, not causing convulsions or epilepsy. It's also an anti-smoking agent. Uh, Years ago, when my mother-in-law was trying to quit smoking, I suggested she take Lobelia, massive doses of vitamin C to help heal her lungs, also chamomile to relax her nerves. It worked really well. In fact, what was interesting is when she was taking the Lobelia, when she would try to smoke, she would start to feel sick to her stomach and want to throw up, which was really reinforcing to wanting to quit smoking. It's one of the most powerful antispasmodic herbs we have. The two that I think are the best antispasmodic herbs are kava kava and lobelia. So if you have any kind of muscle spasms, those two herbs will really help to relax those spasms and ease the pain and tension from the cramping and spasms. It's anti-venomous, meaning that applied topically, it counteracts insect venom bites and stings. So it can be used topically to help with bites and stings. Anxiolytic means it reduces anxiety. It reduces feelings of anxiety and nervousness. It's a bronchial dilator. Now, this is where there's a paradoxical effect to lobelia, because epinephrine and norepinephrine tense muscles and relax the bronchioles. And in other words, the bronchioles have an opposite effect in the sympathetic nervous system to the rest of the muscles. So lobelia, being something that relaxes the rest of the muscles, making it more parasympathetic, should theoretically constrict the bronchioles, but it doesn't. It also relaxes the bronchioles, which is kind of an amazing thing that has that kind of paradoxical action. And this makes it really useful in asthma. Where you use epinephrine inhalers, lobelia can work. Lobelia is a very strong diaphoretic. It relaxes the pores in the skin, producing more sweating. It is a emetic, which means in a sufficient dose, it can make you throw up. It's an expectorant. It actually helps to expel mucus from the lungs. It's also a lymphatic herb. It opens up obstructions in the lymph system, causing the lymph to drain better and helping to shrink swollen lymph nodes and make the immune system work better. And it's a sedative. It can actually help relax you so you can go to sleep. Probably one of the best areas of use for lobelia is in respiratory problems because it relaxes bronchial spasms. So when you have spastic coughing, spasmodic coughing, so every time muscles contract, they're expending energy. So when you're coughing for a long period of time, your lungs start to get spastic. They can't relax. They're and that's what happens in whooping cough. And it gets its name from the sound, the whooping sound of the spasmodic cough. And I saw in Anne of Green Gables. I don't know if any of you have seen that thing. It was years ago, broadcast as a PBS special fundraiser. I love that movie, where Anne goes and there's a kid that's got a really bad cough and she administers Ipecac to him until he coughs up the mucus. And Ipecac actually is an emetic like lobelia, and I'm assuming it acts as a pretty strong relaxant. And so the kid, I would guess, have whooping cough, and basically it relaxes the coughing, eases the coughing, and helps clear the mucus out of the lungs. Before I married my wife, I was married to someone who came from Russia. When she came over from Russia, she had asthma. She used an inhaler. She did not know that it took a prescription to buy an inhaler in America, and she ran out, and she had an asthma attack, and she was like, "We got to go, run to the pharmacy and get an inhaler." And I said, "We got to go to a doctor first." And she was like panicking. I said, "Don't worry," and I started giving her Lobelia, about 5 to 10 drops every 3 or 4 minutes. And we just got in the car to go to the clinic by the hospital so she could get a prescription for the inhaler. And but by the time we drove into town, which is about 15 minutes, 20 minutes from the time the attack started, and we sat down, it was over. And I've seen Lobelia do wonders on that. And if any of you have ever had pleurisy, where you get an inflammation of the lining of the lungs that just hurts like crazy as you breathe in and out, Lobelia plus pleurisy root is one of the most powerful combinations of remedies that will ease the pain in pleurisy and help you breathe again. Um, the interesting thing is it works on the respiratory center of the brain, and it opens up the lungs so you can take in more air, but it also makes your breathing slower and deeper. And that actually helps relax your whole body, because when you're breathing more slowly, it reduces anxiety, and so you're getting these slow, deep, full breaths that help fill your body with oxygen and clear out your lungs, which with the combination of expelling mucus and relaxing the bronchioles and deepening breathing is amazing for asthma or any kind of thing. It probably even could be used in COPD which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, along with other herbs to help the person breathe more fully. And again, they mentioned that it's been used to help people stop smoking. Now, what's less well known and less utilized about Lobelia is its effect on the circulatory system. Lobelia slows the heart rate. At the same time, it increases the heart strength. So the heart beats more strongly, but it also beats more slowly, and it dilates all the peripheral arteries, thereby reducing blood pressure. And when it's combined with capsicum, which acts as a balancing remedy to normalize blood flow through the whole body, the two of them together have a profound effect of easing angina, reducing heart palpitations, reducing high blood pressure. I had a client one time call me up, and they had very high blood pressure. Their top number was over 300, and they said, "What do I do?" I said, "Go to the hospital." I was nervous about that blood pressure being that high. And she says, "I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm not going to go to the hospital. What would you do?" I said, "I would take Lobelia in, drops of doses about 10 to 15 drops every 5 minutes. And if in 1 hour your blood pressure is down, to go to the hospital." She called me back later. 1 hour of taking Lobelia regularly had actually brought her blood pressure down to where it was in a more manageable range. So a lot of times people overlook this as a remedy for this. So helps rapid heart rate and so forth. But it's best used in combination with capsicum. Now, one time was in the south coast of Australia at a Nature Sunshine convention, and a guy started to have symptoms of a heart attack. The pain in the chest, the pain going down the arm, and they asked me to come over. I'm not a doctor, right? But while they're waiting for the ambulance, I said, "Does anybody have any herbs?" I think we managed to get cayenne, lobelia, and hawthorn, and those are the herbs I gave him. And he wanted me to ride to the hospital with him, so we went to the hospital. I was administering these herbs while I was waiting for them to come. And actually, it turned out when he got to the hospital, they checked his heart and it was fine. I don't know, whether we averted, a cardiac arrest or not, but I would certainly think that lobelia, cayenne, and hawthorn would be a good remedy for cardiac aid. Now, I mentioned this briefly, but again, it has this, thing as no smoking aid. What I would recommend is taking it in a dose of 1 capsule, maybe twice a day, maybe 3 times a day if the person tolerates it, but no more. You don't need a ton of this stuff. And then adding chamomile, which helps, I don't know, it just helps soothe the nerves, because a lot of times there's a lot of nervous stress when people are quitting smoking. And then 2 tablets of a anti-stress vitamin supplement with B-complex plus C. For those of you who are familiar with Nature Sunshine, that's called Nutricalm in Nature Sunshine. The analgesic action we talked about, I've taken capsicum extract and lobelia extract, mixed them together in equal parts, rubbed it on all kinds of areas of the body where it's hurting, neck pain, back pain, pain in the legs, wherever there's pain, and massaged it in and using some of the self-help pain techniques, and I've relieved all kinds of pain with that. Um, in some cases, I follow that with a topical analgesic blend, like Taifu essential oils. But the lobelia relaxes. My theory is this: that lobelia relaxes all the muscle tension, opens up the flow of blood and lymph. Cayenne stimulates circulation to that part of the body, as well as cayenne, the capsaicin in cayenne attaches to substance P receptors, which transmit pain, thereby temporarily numbing the pain. And then the essential oils prolong the effect, and you can get all kinds of muscle tension and pain to relax. Again, one of my exes, she just would get these just knots in her back, and the chiropractor would try to adjust her, and it was really hard. Some people just their muscles are so tense you can't do anything. So I did this herbal back adjustment, which is the equal parts lobelia and capsicum, rubbed it into her back, put in the Taifu after that, and all I did was just kind of gently press on her back and out, and her vertebrae started moving back into place. Just because I so deeply relaxed the muscle spasms. And that anti-spasmodic action means it can help any kind of muscle spasms, which one of the uses I made for lobelia is a little bit first thing in the morning to help relax a sliding hiatal hernia and help bring it down. It's been used this is drop doses, like just a few drops to relieve hiccups, to relax the stomach and go back into place. Historically, it was used to treat tetanus, which is lockjaw. All your muscles freeze up. And lobelia, I don't remember what herbalist I read did this, but somebody had lockjaw, and their jaw was so tense they couldn't talk, and they got some lobelia into them, and a few minutes later the person went, "My God, what have you done?" Because suddenly their jaw relaxed and they could talk again. Ticks and twitching and that sort of thing, and kind of nervous, shaking and stuff is caused by muscle exhaustion. Remember, muscles spasm when they're exhausted, and so by relaxing the muscles, it helps the muscle rebuild an energy charge, helps the muscle relax. That could be for TMJ, restless leg syndrome. Glaucoma is actually a tension in the eye. A lot of different applications wherever there's some kind of tension or obstruction in the system. Now, I've mentioned I wouldn't normally use lobelia in pregnancy. I mean, a little teeny bit in a formula or a few drop doses. It's not a good idea to try to make a woman throw up when she's pregnant. They're usually throwing up enough. Although lobelia can counteract nausea and vomiting if you take it in doses of 1 to 2 drops. So 1 drop maybe of lobelia might help nausea, but I mentioned that it does help stop miscarriage with capsicum and false unicorn. I've done this and recommended it a few times, and it's actually worked quite well. And then lobelia can also be administered in doses probably about 5 drops at a time when a woman is in labor, to help ease labor pain, because it's going to relax the pelvic floor, deepen the contractions, and help facilitate the childbirth. Now, as a nervine, someone showed me a little technique where you rub lobelia on the spine of a child who's really nervous and can't go to sleep. I've done that a few times. Again, it's been historically used as a treatment for epileptic seizures. Generally, when you're using it for anxiety, you don't use just lobelia by itself. You put a little teeny bit of lobelia in a formula of nervines like chamomile and vervain and that sort of thing, but just a small amount helps. And like I mentioned, you get enough of it in your system and you get so relaxed that you don't want to move muscle. So it's pretty strong. A couple other uses. always used a little bit of lobelia when treating colds and flu and fever and acute illness in my kids. Usually this is combined with ginger, capsicum, or other pungent herbs, or my yarrow elderflower peppermint formula with kids, or combining it with ALJ or elderberry or golden siliconation. It helps to sweat the cold out. It helps clear the colon. Remember one time had a stepson who woke me up night feverish, sick to his stomach. I had a liquid laxative formula that I had made for kids, and I had some lobelia with me, and I said to myself, I'm going to get this out of his system one way or the other. I gave him the lobelia or laxative formula. He did eventually throw up. He felt better after that, but then he had pains in his lower abdomen. So I kept giving him the herbs, and then finally his whole colon cleared, the fever went down, and he was fine. So I've used that. I've used it in the ears. You have to warm it. You need to warm it to body temperature, but it can ease the pain of earaches. I made the mistake of putting it in one time at room temperature, and the cold makes your ear contract and worsens the pain. So don't ever put it in cold, put it in so it's slightly warm. The insect bites and stings. It also can be used, especially with capsicum or other herbs, as part of a poultice or a compress or whatever to help bruising and other tissue injuries. And one of the things that was interesting to me is when lobelia was taken out of the herbal laxative formula, it didn't work as well. A lot of inability to go to the bathroom is due to intestinal cramping. And sometimes if you take like Cascara sagrada and you have intestinal cramps, you'll experience griping or cramping in your intestinal. But using a stimulant laxative like Cascara with a little bit of lobelia totally avoids that. Now, obviously, start going back to the beginning, this herb is an emetic. And that means that if you're got food poisoning, you went to a restaurant and you got sick to your stomach, you got food poisoning, the fastest way to get over it is to throw up. So basically, if you take a little bit of lobelia, it can make you throw up faster. It can also be used when you've ingested a non-caustic poison. What I mean by a non-caustic poison? Well, if you've ingested a lye or something that burns the tissues on the way down, it's going to burn the tissues on the way back up. So I'm talking about something like a poisonous mushroom or something. Medicine used to recommend that therapy, and they used the herb ipecac, which I mentioned earlier with Anne of Green Gables. Both lobelia and ipecac will very dependably make someone who's got something bad on their stomach throw up. But modern medicine suggests charcoal is better if you've ingested a non-caustic substance. Actually, it works on caustic substances too because it absorbs it. So they don't recommend ipecac anymore, but it still is a potentially viable therapy. And if you do use lobelia or ipecac or some other emetic to make you throw up, it's a good idea to give a little bit of peppermint tea or a little bit of peppermint oil afterwards to settle the stomach, or anything like that that has a stomach settling effect. Okay, now lobelia works as what Matthew Wood calls an activator. Quote, to stir up other herbs in a formula and direct them to the desired tissue or organ needing therapy. Now that kind of action is implied in the testimonies of these herbalists who've used lobelia extensively for many, many years. Dr. John Christopher believed so much in that almost all of his herbal formulas contained a small amount of lobelia and capsicum, until, of course, in Nature Sunshine, most of them wound up getting taken out of them. But it really is quite a useful thing to do. Native Americans, native people who live close to the earth, believed in the idea that an herb possesses intelligence, believed in the idea that an herb could direct the action of other herbs, believed in the idea that herbs could have affinity for certain organs, and that an herb such as hawthorn, maybe having affinity for the heart, could direct other herbs towards the heart. But that really doesn't go well with modern medical, quote unquote, scientific thinking. However, as Matthew Wood said, herbs like to do all sorts of things. They really do have a magical level of action that goes beyond the artificial constructs of the human mind. Plants are intelligence. Plants have life energy. And Lobelia certainly is a plant with a lot of incredible life energy. And therefore, it has actions that kind of defy logic in some ways. Now, I want to also end this with the idea that Lobelia is an acrid herb. It tastes nasty. And a lot of acrid herbs act as antispasmodics, meaning strong muscle relaxants. They relieve one specific tissue condition, which is called constriction, where there's tension in the system. And in TCM, these are known as wind disorders, because typically when you have tension in the system, you get alternating symptoms, alternating fever and sweating, alternating diarrhea and constipation, alternating, muscle pains that shoot from one part of the body to the other. And also the other thing is, so they relieve the tension, normalizing flow and balancing symptoms. And they're also diffusive, meaning that they allow things to diffuse through the system, blood, lymph, chi, energy, whatever, which typically results in an analgesic action of relieving pain. Kava kava is my other favorite acrid antispasmodic herb. Black cohosh actually is also a pretty potent acrid antispasmodic herb. Some other ones that you might be less familiar with: skunk cabbage, which is a very potent one. Vervain or blue vervain is a milder acrid antispasmodic herb. Vervain takes a lot bigger doses to induce vomiting, but it can. And I have typically used vervain as a gentler antispasmodic acrid herb for kids. In other words, rather than giving them the harsher lobelia, which tastes worse too, I have actually substituted out vervain and found it to be quite effective. You need a higher dose than you need for lobelia, but it does help with opening up, relaxing tension, aiding perspiration, and so forth. Some herbs that are antispasmodic but don't have that acrid taste include wild yam, cramp bark, and black haw, which are used to relax muscle spasms. Black cohosh, which by the way has been used to lower blood pressure, just like I told you about with lobelia. It was used by epileptics as an emergency remedy for asthma, so it acts as a bronchial dilator. It could be applied topically as an anti-venomous agent. It is analgesic. It's analgesic for two reasons. One is the antispasmodic effect, and the other one is because it contains salicylates or natural aspirin. Black cohosh was substituted out for lobelia in a lot of Nature's Sunshine formulas after that thing of lobelia being removed from them. I don't know that it replaces lobelia in some of those formulas, but it is an antispasmodic. My other favorite antispasmodic is kava. I one time came home and my spouse was having an anxiety attack so severe that she was developing tetany. Her muscles, her fingers were curling up. Her body was becoming so tense that she just was like locking in muscle spasms. I saw someone else having a really, really severe anxiety attack and did a similar thing with them. It wasn't quite so severe as involving like tetany, but what I did is I administered kava in liquid form and lobelia in liquid form together over and over again every 2 or 3 minutes. It took me about 10 minutes till everything relaxed and they came out of it. Kava is nice because it's more anxiolytic than lobelia, meaning reducing anxiety, and it has a little bit of a euphoric effect of like making you feel good. And it's more of a sleep inducer. So it's another herb that can be used in a similar way. Before I get to the comments and questions, I want to mention that our next Holistic Perspective webinar, which will be held September 4th, is going to be on network marketing, social network marketing, using like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those kinds of things to market your business. So we're going to move away from a health topic to a business topic. And our next month's theme is boosting your immune system. The idea of not just worrying about trying to kill germs, disinfectant, whatever, but maintaining a strong immune system to keep you healthy and resistant to disease. I am teaching a pre-convention class for Nature Sunshine, which you can register through Nature's Institute. And I've set up the, it's Module 4. I put the wrong one. Module 4, which is about the mental and emotional aspect of healing and our fundamentals to natural health. And again, I want to mention one other thing. I sent out an email about this today, but we just are getting ready to print and we'll be shipping next week our new emotional healing charts. I have this, those of you who may have listened to a couple of months ago when I did a webinar on energetic aromatherapy, this grew out of that project. The aromatherapy emotional healing charts, and I also have a chart. You can go look them up online on our website. There's the one that covers essential oils and aromatherapy. The other covers the question affirmation technique, the affirmations we use, and flower essences for the 12 emotional energy centers. And I did a webinar that's in the member archives on using the question affirmation technique that you can look up and check that out. All right, now we'll go to questions and comments and so forth. And someone said, recently had a friend who had quit smoking a few months earlier, experienced a lot of digestive issues and trouble sleeping. When I put her on cordyceps and lobelia, I had fantastic results. Any thoughts? Well, one of the things about cordyceps is it's a fabulous balancing tonic to the entire body. It helps to just kind of balance out the energies of a person. Cordyceps is a wonderful remedy. When we went to the Tang Ring Pharmacy in 2006 with Nature Sunshine, and all the doctors were checking everybody, they were recommending cordyceps left and right for everything. And when you have a lot of damage to your lungs, cordyceps is one of the best remedies I know to help heal damage to your lungs. So I think lobelia is great. I would recommend that you use lobelia in the extract form because it's easier to get an appropriate dose. One capsule of lobelia is a pretty heavy-duty dose. You can use it, you can do it, but it's easier to administer 5 or 10 drops of the extract. So you're doing small doses. It's less risk of making a person throw up. So I would recommend that you always, in your first aid supplies, have lobelia in extract form because that's the most useful way to use it. Again, you can use the capsules, but that's when you need a larger doses. I don't know. Lobelia is not in any TCM book I've ever seen. Someone just said they love focusing on one herb. Well, I actually thought it was fun to just take and focus in depth on one herb this time. I've done that in the past a few times. I did kava one time. I can't remember. I've done a couple others, but it is kind of interesting to just do an in-depth exploration of one herb. And lobelia, to me, is a fascinating herb that definitely deserves, an entire devotion because it has so many incredible uses in such a controversial history. But it's so useful in my experience that I definitely thought it deserved things. Someone says, I love lobelia even more now. Are there any other questions or comments about lobelia or whatever you want to mention? Someone says, I have a disorder that affects my muscles. Lobelia has been my staple herbs for years. It's an excellent herb. Absolutely. I think I would love to see just about everybody understand lobelia and have lobelia in their home because you think about the uses of this, lobelia and capsicum, Thompson's 1 and 2, because someone has a heart attack, someone has an asthma attack, someone starts to develop tachycardia, high blood pressure, someone, starts, having difficulty breathing, or they suddenly have a lot of pain or cramping and muscle tension, or get bit by an insect, or blah, 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 blah. There's so many, amazing first aid applications that you can make of those two herbs, just those two herbs in general, that I think if a lot of people just knew how to use those two herbs, they could save themselves a lot of emergency, situations with just those two herbs. Used lobelia on a newborn with whooping cough topically and internally, plus put garlic on her feet. Did this in the hospital. They were blown away at how fast the baby got better. Thank you, Pat, for sharing that. So it's so true. Lobelia is a fabulous remedy for whooping cough. And the garlic, of course, is a really good infection-fighting herb for the lungs, and it's absorbed right through the feet. And that's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. For pain in legs and knees, lobelia and, okay, I would say if you have like pain anywhere in your body, you can apply the lobelia and capsicum to that area, and you can follow it up with, depending on the nature of the injury. If it's kind of like an osteoarthritic kind of thing where there's damage to the joints, I would recommend following it with the MSM glucosamine cream. If it's more just like acute pain or irritation, you can follow it with Typhu oil or Typhu massage lotion. You could also use a little bit of wintergreen oil. It's just, a single oil. But just like I said, the healing power, in my opinion, of this has to do with the fact that I believe it takes three things in order for any tissue to heal. One, you have to have a good supply of blood to the area. Two, you have to have good lymphatic drainage. And three, you have to have a good nerve supply. So I think the combination of capsicum stimulating circulation, lobelia removing obstructions and aiding lymph flow and aiding, the muscle tension that inhibits blood and lymph flow, and then some kind of essential oil that's also stimulating nervous system activity in that area helps anything to heal. That's my theory. I think that's part of the reason why just that little bit of cayenne and lobelia in Christopher's formulas has an effect of accelerating the healing ability of other herbs, because it's stimulating circulation and lymph flow and relaxing tension and obstruction, allowing the remedies to be delivered where they're needed to the tissues. And that's the idea of the intelligent herb, or the intelligent activator. Yes, I'm saying that cordyceps is one of the best. It's one of the things I would look at the most if someone has emphysema or chronic bronchitis or any other kind of serious chronic lung disorder, which also includes, really bad chronic asthma. It has a balancing effect on the immune system. It helps calm down autoimmune reactions as well as stimulate where there's weakened immunity, as in infections and cancer. And it also just tends, especially with the lungs, to just help improve the tone and function of the lungs. It's a little bit It's also helpful for the kidneys. It helps the kidney chi with kidney weakness as well. That would be come to think of it, cordyceps would be a really interesting herb to do a whole thing on sometime. Oh, I don't know if we still have MSM glucosamine cream. If we don't, then the option would be Everflex. I mean, I still have some. And the reason why I know about this is because I broke my kneecap on my right knee when I was 23 years old, which is over 40 years ago. And occasionally when it bothers me a little bit, I'll put a little bit of I might use capsicum lobelia or a little bit of Typhu or a little bit of MSM glucosamine cream and do a little massage on it and get it, being fine again in a couple of days. If I kind of overstress it because it's kind of a little bit weakened because, it's because it was so badly injured so long ago, but it doesn't inhibit me from, doing things. So I'm pretty pleased with that. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us. It's our hour is up. Thanks for all of the comments. Thanks for being members and for supporting us and helping us with our efforts to get education out to everybody. Please share the message of Lobelia with people in who are your clients and downline, and if you haven't used it very much, start experimenting with it, because I think you'll find it's an amazing herb. So thanks again, and good night.